Good morning, my name is Alex Woods. I'm a financial mis-selling litigator. I specialise in financial products and insolvency. And today I'm going to give you this is going to be a bumper session in which I am going to waffle on at some considerable length. And so those who are looking for a short video over a cigarette and a cup of coffee, which is probably for insolvency practitioners qualifies as the typical lunch break, you should, unfortunately, this video is probably not for you. We live in a soundbite universe. This video is not a soundbite, and indeed, I don't apologise for the length of this video because the world is so full of little marketing type publicity soundbite videos. What do you really get from it? So you watch this for a good 20 minutes or so, and you will get some crown jewels, some gold nuggets of that will help you to address some of the rather difficult, thorny and quasi-legal issues that surround the problems of realising payment protection insurance and other financially sold products in insolvency. So this is part 10, it's the final instalment. You can relax after you've watched this video. Now this really is probably the most important and certainly the most substantial video that I'm going to be doing on the subject, and it comes about as a result of an invitation by Insolvency Today, with whom I had a meeting a week ago, who asked for stats on a range of areas. They're going to be bringing out an article on the issue probably in December. I think that's when they next go to print, that will help insolvency practitioners deal with the issues of costs of realising payment protection insurance in insolvency, and whether those costs are likely to absorb the proceeds. And I am as I say, a financial mis-selling solicitor. I have set up financial mis-selling units at one law firm 2 or 3 years ago now. I then moved on to consult to help set up with another law firm. Even before those two law firms, I had a consultant solicitor, a very experienced consultant solicitor, who was one of the pioneers in the area of claims management companies processing large quantities of insolvency practitioners' payment protection insurance. So, and I have now more recently started to build a relationship. Well, I've had a relationship for a long time with the claims management company, whom I believe are reputable, and we are now working on filling their factory. So this is, somewhat a partisan video, so you should bear that in mind too. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to structure this video in across 5 sections. You've already had the first. I'm going to touch on the guidance note as I typically do, the relevant extracts. I'm then going to look at the actual likely value of a payment protection insurance product per IVA if you're an insolvency practitioner, and the various nuts and bolts around that. I'm then going to go on to the costs of running a unit. I'm slightly, but not hugely, constrained by the fact that I have been a consultant solicitor over the past year to a law firm who are processing PR products. But there's enough blue water, I think, and my consultancy came to an end in July for me to talk about it, certainly in general terms, without spilling any beans and any commercially sensitive information. So I'm then going to talk about the costs of running a unit. I'm then going to touch on bankruptcy very briefly, because this video is mainly directed at IVAs. And then I'm going to conclude by coming to a conclusion over, trying to give you an answer to this question of whether or not you should do it yourself or whether you should instruct a law firm or a CMC. And I'm going to look forward to the future of other financial mis-selling claims, which I think is something that you need to bear in mind. Now, you've got a link here to a PDF, which I will endeavour to get onto the site underneath this video, which will help, and bring that PDF up now so that you can have a look at the stats whilst I am talking to you. So the first thing is to look at the guidance note then. So I often feel I go over the top with telling IPEs, look, you have got a duty to at the very least audit your files for financial mis-selling products. I mean, you could get conceivably in trouble with the regulator, with debtors, down the track. And really this intuition, if you like, that I've had over the period of the mis-selling scandal is reinforced by the text of the guidance note in 4.1, which tells insolvency practitioners that there is a duty to, at the very least, look at the issue, do an audit, and make an assessment of whether or not it is worth realising financially mis-sold products as an asset in insolvency, in personal insolvency. Of course, as the guidance note just deals with personal insolvency. So I think you have to bite the bullet on doing an audit. The second thing to note is, under 4.1, it's easy to say, well, the funds aren't available in the IVA or the bankruptcy, and therefore I just don't think that, that the costs are justified. Well, there are a bunch of no-win, no-fee operators out there. I mean, that is the way that the support service industry insolvency petitions is structured. So, and whilst an audit fee I think is appropriate and typical, particularly if you're asking a law firm to process to cash flow the operation, I do think that you can come to a compromise and negotiate with a law firm about the amount of the audit fee, or you can go to a CMC who may not charge an audit fee at all, or it may be far smaller. So there it is. An office holder does have an obligation to pursue a PPI mis-selling claim if there would be does not have an obligation to pursue a mis-selling claim if there would be no substantial benefit. So, maybe to a point the jury is out, substantial benefit on whether or not it is essential for a insolvency practitioner to realise PPI assets. But, I am desperately, as you can tell, trying to find a reason to be impartial and to say to insolvency practitioners, well, you don't have to do it. You do. Have a look at these stats now. So the first thing to come on to the issue of the nuts and bolts. As you can see, I am pretty confident on these stats. I mean, really quite confident through 4 companies that I have had some level, sometimes in absolutely total and complete involvement with the operation, to just getting consultancy from someone involved with the operation. So these, and I'm prepared to go into print on these, and I've supplied these stats to Insolvency Today to go into print on them. Now, I think the average, I'm not going to go into the stats, you've got them in front of you, but I will just touch on the caveats, if you like, on the notes. I think there are a number of things to say. I think the first thing to say is, £2,500 per PPI claim is reasonable, and when you run it down, you end up with about £3,500 for each IVA. Now, you will find some companies will tell you that, well, we're a very large company, we've got a PPI picker at the banks who make it all, will process the work for us and make it that much more efficient. And they also tell us the history of that particular debtor client's debts, which you might not, which is something that a smaller CMC or service company that's processing your PPI they may not get hold of that information because they won't have one of these PPI pickers or account managers. So there is an issue. I'm not sure how much I'm convinced by that argument. Certainly, you will need to do some work. Your service company does need to work to, to bring the banks into heel, if you like. And there will be times when particular banks may not be in a hurry to disclose PPI on old loans that have been refinanced. That may then alter that £2,500 average value of a PPI claim. I have heard a figure of 1,800, but that is not a figure that I've actually seen. The 2.5 figure is stats that I've actually seen from my involvement with running or consultant at PPI units themselves. Okay, the next caveat to bring to your attention is the value of a PPI claim. Now, I'm not convinced that all service companies are maximising returns, and I've mentioned in the notes to the PDF that you've got that the FCA have brought out a report in September of last year on small and medium-sized banks. It's not the massive retail ones. Nevertheless, they've come up with figures, quite interesting, surprising figures, that where claims had been upheld, in 43% of those cases, they weren't satisfied with the redress. And this is something I've been banging on about for a long time, and it's only come about because I've been litigating these cases, and I did one 2 years ago against MBNA, in which we had to take it all the way to the courtroom doors to take a £3,500 offer to £6,750 payout. Because there are lots of issues around quantum. Not just whether the banks may be giving you just 6 months, years of statements worth of refund, but going all the way back, they may have bought the debt from somebody else, but can't obtain the documentation from Abbey or Santander, who now might own the debt. So there also may be the consumer's individual circumstances, and there is now landmark judgment. There's now been a sea change in the way that the courts address the time loss of money, and whilst traditionally it's been simple 8%, there's been a sea change, and now you'll discover that the courts are, if it's pleaded properly, awarding compound interest on top of damages. And indeed, claims are being brought for compound interest as damages, independent of a claim for the damages themselves. So that is significant when it comes to processing PPI and running a PPI unit. You want a service company to be maximising returns and not just taking the first offer that comes along. Now, you've got to be realistic about this. If you've got a small claim for 200 quid, you're not going to spend 3 hours arguing, bouncing letters backwards and forwards between you and the banks to try and get it lifted up to 300 quid. But the quantums are substantial, and in fact I'm meeting a barrister at Essex, at one Essex court today, who were involved in that landmark judgment, and for advice on this area. And in terms of the quantum, it can be substantial. It could double the amount of claims. So that's another reason why I think there are caveats, if you like, around this figure that I've published of £2,500. Finally, on the nuts and bolts of the figures themselves, set-off. Our familiar friend set-off. You will be, if you're an insolvency practitioner, most of you will probably be processing, perhaps running a trial in-house, and you will be running into set-off arguments brought by the banks. Now, 6 months to a year ago, I was more concerned about set-off than I am now. I've started to sort of arrive at my own conclusions about where the set-off should be dealt with, and you can see what I say on previous bulletins below. The point is that there will be some variety as a result of set-off. It could be that you are only finding 5 or 10% of your claims are being set off. It could be 25%, and likewise that will affect the values that you get. Just by way of general caveat, don't forget that in order to the success rates that I've got up there of around about 70% of every PPI claim, don't forget, before you get there, you've also got to factor debtor pack drop-off. Not all debtors are going to complete the questionnaires in timely fashion before the completion of the IVA, and so you're going to find some general drop-off. Which brings me neatly on to the next section of my posting, which is what are the costs, and perhaps this is one of the most interesting sections, one of the most interesting areas and issues that I'll be touching on across any of the video bulletins that I'm producing for insolvency practitioners, insofar as processing financial mis-selling claims are concerned, and whether to do it in-house or at all. So I'm just looking at a sheet here which breaks down the figures. I'm going to be talking in general terms because I don't want to step on the toes of consultancy agreements or relationships with other firms, but I think I can say, but I think it's fine for me to say that, let's take the example that I've got in the PDF. You have got 300 IVAs. You have actually got 300 signed debtor packs, which have got the information that you require in order to bring a claim, in order to audit and then bring a claim against the bank. Don't forget that I've factored in a 33% drop off there, so that you will have need to have sent out 450 IVA debtor packs and questionnaires to generate those 300 IVAs. I'm looking obviously at the business as a whole rather than as each individual IVA, which obviously you should also look at if you're an IP, but I suspect that more of interest to you is, whether it's generally going to be a worthwhile exercise in the round for you and your business. So you've got to factor in that. Now, I know it rather depends on the IP as to whether or not you get a 33% debtor pack drop off or not. Some IPs are quite play hardball, or quite robust towards their debtor clients about them completing these packs. After all, they have an obligation to do so and to cooperate with their IVA supervisor. Others are less so, and the performance of the service company will be slightly constrained, insofar as the IP is a robust IP or not, and the extent to which the IP is happy for the service company to act as its agent in chasing down debtors and getting those debtor packs returned. So that's something to bear in mind. Then, if we're then processing those 300 IVAs, I'm just assuming from a standing start, you're then probably looking at a 6-month period. Well, let's take a year period, which is what I take. You are going to need around about 4 staff, 1 person managing 3 full-time. You are then going to be probably achieving about 60 PPI complaints, getting 60 PPI complaints out per month. Obviously, you will have, prior to the PPI complaints, you will have been doing an audit, so you won't actually start bringing money into the unit. If you're a third-party service company, a law firm or CMC, you probably won't be actually bringing money into your business for between 3 to 6 months. In fairness, probably 3 to 6 months. In fairness, in any substantial quantities. And you will probably, once the unit is up and running after that initial 3 to 6 month period, you will probably be seeing about 15 refunds, checks drop into your pocket or into the pockets of the IP each month. Now, this is quite a conservative picture that I'm painting here because, as I say, I am trying to focus on the issue of, whether you are meeting your obligations under the guidance note. And I think, therefore, it's better to take a conservative approach. So there is that's what it takes. After 6 months, you would probably then take on another 300 IVAs, and therefore it will roll on for 2 to 3 years on that basis. And after a year, you may have a staff of 8. I would say, to give you a rough guide, that once the unit is up and running after 3 to 6 months, perhaps it might take a year, depends upon how many staff you employ and how efficient and robust you are in running the unit. You might be enjoying, if you're the service company, but obviously the same principle applies if you're doing it in-house, £20,000, invoicing £20,000 a month. I think that's not a bad yardstick to use. It will be lumpy, obviously, but to extrapolate it over a longer period, you'll probably be enjoying returns of around £20,000 a month. So there it is. You've got the stats on the videos. You have got the opportunity and the facility to post comments on this video in order to generate a discussion and to share your stats if you feel you'd like those stats to be shared. I can come on to my conclusion and to finish this posting. I mean, I like to think of processing payment protection insurance, which is something of a headache for an insolvency practitioner. I like to employ a metaphor of an oil slick. I know it's not going to make you any money, and I know you're already under the cosh as far as, you know, actually being able to run a business processing IVA. It's such a good debt tool, and yet it's such a kind of a shame in a way that the climate is such that, that IPs just simply aren't able to run IVA units in any quantities. Anyway, the metaphor I like to use is an oil slick, like the one off the Gulf of Mexico, except we're talking about financial mis-selling, and the insolvency practitioner is your firm and faithful and steady and robust little tug that's spraying the detergent onto the ocean waves and cleaning off the oil. And of course, a morally corrupt thing, which is what has been happening to our financial sectors. It's probably, it is a very valuable and useful service to be cleaning up these financial products. I don't think it's just a waste of time. I don't think it's something that should be ignored. I think that there is something of an ethical duty to do it. But I also think, if you look at these stats, that if it's done well, I think it can be almost, a profitable exercise. Not quite, but it can help oil the wheels of the IVA. It can help oil the wheels of the IVA. Right, so to conclude, I think my answer is, if you're a very large insolvency practitioner, you'll probably have your own legal team, you'll probably have your own relationships in place. You probably won't want to go to a service company in order to process payment protection returns. I don't know. But I think where you are a smaller or medium-sized insolvency practitioner, then it is certainly worthwhile using a service company for all of the complex reasons I've referred to above. Although I think my conclusion would be that if you can't find a service company that you think is not only reputable, i.e. they aren't bombarding you and your family and your relatives and your life with text messages and cold calling you, if you can't find a reputable service company, and if you can't find one that you're confident is going to process and expedite these claims in a timely fashion, that's the key thing here, timely fashion, then you may well prefer to do it in-house and to run your own in-house styled system of dealing with the PPI scandal. So, however, the fly in the ointment is that there are other financial mis-selling scandals, and I think I would conclude by saying that if you can find a reputable outfit, and I feel quite this is a bit of a, well, it's not a plug. I am trying to be straight and independent. I'm a solicitor, and I've got to, be independent. And the whole point of these videos is for me to give independent consultancy to the insolvency practitioner world. So I think I am being independent and giving this view, even though I also have an interest, because as I say, I'm working with the claims management company. I'm not making huge amounts of money from the relationship. Anyway, interest rate swaps. There is there are other scandals. There are investment scandals. There are, to an extent, mortgage mis-selling scandals. And I think if you've used the patent protection insurance scandal as a springboard to build a relationship with the service company, then that is the most intelligent, business-like approach to dealing with PPI in insolvency. To use it so it's not, doesn't feel like a burden and a weight and a millstone, but to use this scandal as an opportunity to forge relationships with service companies for your long-term needs. Thank you very much for your attention today. I think the Insolvency Today article is coming out in the December issue, I believe, and please do phone, email or post your comments if you have any. Until next time, that's Alex Wood signing off.